Welcome. You are in the How PubMed Works MeSH session. My name is Liz Morris. I'm an Outreach and Access Coordinator with Region 5 of the Network of the National Library of Medicine, or NNLM. I'm located in Seattle. My primary institution is the University of Washington Health Sciences Library, and I'm very glad to be here today talking with you all about MeSH. I am joined by colleagues from the National Library of Medicine. Carol Ann Curry also works with me in Region 5. Amanda Sawyer is with the National Center for Biotechnology Information, and Rebecca Brown is with the NNLM's National Training Office. As I said, today's session is one of four in the How PubMed Works series, and today's session is focused on medical subject headings, otherwise known as MeSH. And let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda. So during our time today, we're going to cover kind of four primary topics. First, we'll define MeSH and discuss why we use it, plus we'll look at entry terms. We'll then look at the hierarchical structure of MeSH and talk about a feature called automatic explosion. We'll then talk about the four primary types of MeSH terms and look at examples of each. And then we'll dissect a MeSH record in full to kind of help us understand all the components that are included in a MeSH record. I will be doing some live demos throughout the class, both in PubMed and the MeSH database, and you're more than welcome to follow along with those if you would like, but again, that's not required. So what are MeSH terms and why are they useful? MeSH stands for Medical Subject Headings, and it's the National Library of Medicine's controlled vocabulary that represents concepts in the biomedical literature. And this is number 1 on your handout. MeSH is a controlled vocabulary. Because there are many different ways to describe a single concept, MeSH provides a way to connect the possible variant terms to the preferred MeSH heading, which gives uniformity and consistency to indexing and cataloging. Note that in PubMed, MeSH is only applied to citations that are indexed for Medline. So if you participated in the How PubMed Works selection course, you may recall that citations indexed for Medline make up the vast majority of PubMed citations. MeSH headings are organized hierarchically into several main branches, and that's where the idea of the MeSH tree comes from. And this is number 2 on your handout. MeSH terms are organized hierarchically. And MeSH terms are revised annually to reflect changes in the biomedical literature. This is number 3 on your handout. MeSH is revised annually. So during MeSH's annual update, terms can be added, replaced, or reorganized in the hierarchy. So let's look at an example of a MeSH term. So on the slide, we see the MeSH term myocardial infarction in bold on the left. The variants or synonyms for this term are listed on the right side of the slide, and these are called entry terms. And this is number 4 on your handout. The terms that are synonymous or close in scope to the preferred MeSH term are called entry terms. So these are the terms that the MeSH vocabulary associates with myocardial infarction. So in PubMed or another system using MeSH, we can run a search using the term heart attack or any of the other entry terms on the list, and it automatically maps or connects to the preferred MeSH term, which in this case is myocardial infarction. So it's the preferred term that exists on the Medline record. So this mapping from entry term to preferred term means that searches with any of these terms retrieve relevant results. So sometimes using an entry term can be especially effective because PubMed will search for both the entry term you use in all fields and the MeSH term it maps to. And that's what we see here with the eye strain example on the slide. I ran a search in PubMed using the term eye strain. Then I located my search details by clicking on Advanced under the search box, and I scrolled down to my history and search details. The details show that eye strain mapped to the preferred MeSH term, which is astenopia. This is because PubMed's automatic term mapping recognized eye strain as an entry term. And we will be teaching a session on automatic term mapping later this week on Thursday the 17th. And I believe registration is still open for that. And so I highly recommend this automatic term mapping session if you want to understand more of the nitty-gritty about how PubMed processes the terms you enter in the search box. And Carol Ann put a link to the registration page in chat, and Rebecca has confirmed that yes, indeed, registration is still open. So please feel free to join us for that. So back to our entry terms. Any biomedical term that you use in your PubMed search, such as eye strain or heart attack, should map to MeSH terms, which enhances your search and ensures that you retrieve the relevant Medline citations. And the search details feature also shows us that PubMed searched for eye strain as well, and using the search details allows us to find other relevant results by keyword. So now I'm going to invite you to try this for yourself, this searching for an entry term in PubMed. So if you are able, please go to PubMed and search for the term drug abuse. Carol Ann has put a link in chat to get you to PubMed if you would like to follow along. When you enter drug abuse into the PubMed search box, don't use search tags or quotation marks, and go ahead and run your search. After you run your search in PubMed, go ahead and click Advanced to locate your search details and check to see how drug abuse mapped. Go ahead and let me know in the chat box, which MeSH term did drug abuse map to? I'm seeing results coming in for substance-related disorders, and that is accurate. Great job. So let me show you how this looks in MeSH. I'm going to start in PubMed. Uh, you can get to MeSH from any page in PubMed by scrolling to the bottom, and in the gray area, you can link directly to MeSH like so, just by clicking on MeSH. So now I'm in the MeSH database, and I'm going to search drug abuse in the MeSH database. The top result that comes up for me is substance-related disorders. And when I click into this, it's going to take us to the full MeSH record for the term. So now I'm in the full MeSH record for the term substance-related disorders. And when I scroll down in the record, I come to this area called entry terms. And on this long list of entry terms, towards the bottom, I see drug abuse. So this entry term listed here, drug abuse, is why our search in PubMed pulled in the MeSH term substance-related disorders, and it retrieved all Medline records that are indexed with that term. So I'm going to pause very quickly and see if anybody has any questions about what we just did. Danette asked, how did I get to this list? Danette, I assume your asking about how I got to the list of entry terms, and I am happy to show you that. When I was first learning about MeSH, I found I had to keep reminding myself if I was in PubMed or MeSH. So the way I got to that list was from MeSH database. I just typed drug abuse, and then the top result um, for drug abuse was this particular record, substance-related disorders. And then I clicked on substance-related disorders, which was flagged for us in our PubMed search details. And within substance-related disorders, I scrolled towards the midpoint of the record to find the list of entry terms. Okay. Any other questions? Carol Ann, Amanda, anything I missed?
Yes. So Faye has commented, the MeSH website shows, quote, substance dash related disorders, while the PubMed search shows substance related disorders with no dash. So I don't know if that's a question exactly or more of a comment.
That's a great observation. Amanda, do you have any insight on that?
Sure. Yeah, happy to hop in here. So when you're searching in PubMed, special characters like non-alphanumeric characters like hyphens and parentheses are usually used to create search syntax. Like parentheses are used when you're nesting terms together, and hyphens can be used to force a phrase search. And so PubMed translates these special characters to either that syntax option or to a space. And so it's just a reality of how a searching in a database works. It's the same term, but hyphens force a phrase search. So when you see it in your search details, it will be translated to a space.
So Amanda, does the difference really matter, or is it largely just a syntax thing?
It's largely a syntax thing. If you're
Mm-hmm.
going to copy and paste terms from MeSH to a PubMed search, the hyphen might then force a phrase search, which if you're using a MeSH term, you probably want that in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But if you run into problems with like syntax issues like this, please write to the help desk. My team and I would be happy to take a look and help you out with it.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Carol Ann. Okay, great questions. Keep them coming. Uh, so the next thing I want to talk about is the structure of MeSH and automatic explosion. So this slide shows the main branches or categories of MeSH, and the items that are highlighted are the four most highly used branches, and this includes the anatomy category, the chemicals and drugs category, the diseases category, and also organisms. And you'll notice that there's a plus sign next to every branch, and that means that there are sub-branches. So I'm going to go back to MeSH and invite you to join me there. And I'm going to return to where I left off on the substance-related disorders record. But again, remember that you can find your way to the MeSH database at the bottom of any PubMed page. So I'm going to scroll down a bit in the substance-related disorder records. I'm going to move past the entry terms that we already discussed, and I'm going to come down to where it starts to look hierarchical. So here I see the MeSH tree. And to find the top level view of the MeSH tree, you can move your cursor up and click on all MeSH categories to get a bird's eye view of the hierarchy that I showed in the slide. So if you were ever curious about the top layer of the MeSH tree and wanted to really poke around in all the sublayers, this is where you could start. And I accessed this from within a specific record, just worked my way up the tree to where it said all MeSH categories. So I'm actually going to go back into that very high level view for all MeSH categories and demonstrate a little bit of the branching. So when I click on the anatomy category, it expands in many ways, and I can scroll down to body regions. And within body regions, I'm going to find head and see that there are more, that there's a plus sign indicating even more categories or sub-branches. And this is what we mean when we refer to the hierarchy of MeSH. As we click into each sub-branch, the terms become more specific. So here I am at head. I'm going to click into head and scroll down a little bit in the head record to see further subcategories. So I see that face is a narrower or more specific term than head in this list, but I also see that face is a broader term than cheek, eye, or mouth. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper and click into eye. I know there's going to be more there because there is a plus sign next to it. So now I'm in the eye record in MeSH, and I scroll down to find my hierarchy, and I see that eye is in two different branches of the MeSH hierarchy. Eye exists under body regions, and eye also exists under sense organs. So the next thing I'm about to say is important. We get a lot of questions about it. When you run a search in PubMed using a broader term such as eye, your search will automatically explode to include all of the narrower, more specific terms from all the branches for your search term. So if I were to run a search term in PubMed for eye, I would get citations indexed with eyebrows, eyelashes, iris, cornea, all of the more narrow terms that are under eye on the screen here. And this is called automatic explosion. And this is by design to bring in relevant results. And this is number 5 on your handout. Automatic explosion includes all narrower terms in your search. So at this point, we've searched the MeSH database, but let's go ahead and build a PubMed search from within MeSH using the search builder. So I'm going to scroll up. I'm still in the eye record in MeSH, and I'm going to scroll up to find my search builder in the upper right-hand part of the page. So let's go ahead and add this term eye to the search builder by clicking on Add to Search Builder. So notice that the term is tagged as MeSH in the search builder. Because we're searching with a MeSH term, we'll only retrieve Medline citations because those are the only citations with MeSH terms. So let's go ahead and click on Search PubMed to run this search. So now we're back in PubMed, and we get more than 401,000 results for our search of eye, which is incredibly broad. So I'm going to explore my search details a little bit. So go ahead, we can click on Advanced, which is right below the search box, and scroll down to History and Search Details. I'm locating the chevron under my details and expanding it to see what shows up. So what is missing in these search details? What are we not seeing here that we just discussed when we were exploring the MeSH record? I've seen a suggestion for entry terms. Does anybody else have ideas of what we're not seeing? The search on all fields, narrower terms. Yes, that is the answer that we are looking for. we do not see any of the narrower terms from the MeSH hierarchy that we saw in the MeSH record, like eyebrow, iris, cornea, etc. Reminder that entry terms are kind of colloquial, plain language synonyms that people might enter into a search box that would then get mapped to a MeSH terms. These more narrow terms that we're talking about are part of the MeSH vocabulary, and they are the things that are included in automatic explosion. And this is number 6 on your handout. Will your PubMed search details show all the narrower MeSH terms included in your search? And the answer is no. All of the more narrow terms from the MeSH tree are included in your search automatically, but you do not see them in the PubMed search details. So let's look at one of the results for this search, and you can either click back in your browser or just go ahead and click on results from our history and search details. So I'm back at the 400,000 plus search results for our MeSH term I. And I'm going to invite Carol Ann to go ahead and pop a PubMed ID into the chat that you can use to access the citation I'm going to access, or we can sort by best match and then select item number 4, which is anatomy and physiology of the cornea. I'm going to click into this citation. Again, Carol Ann has just put a PubMed ID into the chat box. If you'd like to enter that PubMed ID into PubMed, this will take you directly to the record as well. I'll give everybody a minute to get there. Okay, so here I am in the PubMed record for anatomy and physiology of the cornea. And I want to identify my MeSH terms in this record. So what I'm going to do, you have a couple options. You can scroll all the way down in the record to get to the MeSH section, or on the right-hand side is something called page navigation. And I'm going to select MeSH terms to take me to the MeSH terms for this record. So you'll notice that although we searched for I and accessed this record as a result of searching for I is not listed here in MeSH terms. Does anybody know why, or does anybody have a guess as to why that might be? Go ahead and tell me in the chat box. Why don't we see I here, but we see other I-related terminology? Yes, yep, yep. Yep, it's showing more narrow terms here. That is the spot on answer. So our search for I automatically exploded to search for citations indexed with more narrow terms below I in the hierarchy, and cornea is one of those terms. So this specific article was indexed with cornea, a more narrow term of I. So to review, when you're trying to understand all of the terms that might be included in a specific search, you can check both your PubMed search details and also the MeSH database to understand the more specific terms that are being included. And this is number 7 on your handout. Check your PubMed search details and the MeSH database record for each MeSH term that will be included in your PubMed search. So I have an exercise to kind of help us reinforce this. So when you run a search in PubMed using the MeSH term fear, what other MeSH terms will be included in your search? So go ahead and go to PubMed and um, and or the MeSH database, wherever you'd like to start, and search for fear, and let me know what other MeSH terms will be included in your search. And once you have an answer, let me know in chat. Okay, we've got one for panic, phobia, social. If you're having a hard time, I know I said you could um, start in PubMed if you wanted, but I would suggest going straight to the MeSH database and searching for fear there and entering the record for fear and seeing what pops up. Okay, there's another vote for panic, which is the correct answer. So this is number 8 on your handout. Where did you look to find your answer? For those of you who came across panic as your result, where did you look? Yes, the MeSH tree in the MeSH database. So let me go ahead and demo this for you. I'm going to pop into MeSH. I'm in PubMed, but I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here and access MeSH. And then I'm going to enter fear into the MeSH database. I'm going to pop into my top result and scroll down, and I can see in the MeSH tree below fear is the word panic. So if I were to run a search in PubMed for the word fear, my results would also include items that had been cataloged with the term panic, because panic is a more narrow term than fear. So I'm going to go back to our eye example very quickly. So a question we hear a lot is, can you limit your search to a particular branch of the MeSH tree? And the answer is no, you cannot limit your search to a particular branch. So by default, all narrower terms from all branches will be included in your search as a result of automatic explosion. However, you can completely turn off automatic explosion for a specific term and then manually add in additional terms of interest. And the way you can do that is from a feature in the MeSH record. So I'm back in the MeSH record for I. And there's a box down here that says, do not include MeSH terms found below this term in the MeSH hierarchy. So when I click on that and add this to my search builder, you can see that it's been tagged as no explosion. At this point, if you wanted to, you could add more MeSH terms to your search. But we like to caution people when doing that, because if you use the no explosion feature, you might miss a relevant citation that was indexed with a more specific term. But just wanted to call your attention that this is an option for you. So I'm going to pause really quickly before we move on. Are there any questions that I can answer? Okay. So far we've defined MeSH and oh, I see something just came in. So what is the lag time for MeSH terms to be assigned? Amanda, do you have any insight on that? MeSH terms, the MeSH hierarchy we know is updated annually, but in terms of how and when they're applied in indexing, do you have any insight on that?
It's typically within 24 hours of a citation being added to PubMed, and usually less than that, but we say wait about a day. There used to be a more significant lag time before we switched to automated indexing, but now MeSH terms should be applied to a citation within 24 hours is what we say.
Great, thank you. And somebody asked, are MeSH terms still assigned manually?
They are not. We made the switch to Medline, automated Medline indexing, full indexing in, I think it was April of 2022. There are staff we have curators who review the terms that are assigned. There's selected subsets of citations as well as random subsets of citations that they review, correct, and then provide feedback on the algorithm that's used for indexing. So there is still human curation and involvement in the indexing process, but they are fully assigned by the algorithm at this time. And I'll just add on to that, if you notice something that you think is an error in MeSH indexing, you are welcome to report those to NLM's help desk, and someone from the indexing team will take a look at that for you.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. And then one more question, and we'll move on to our MeSH terms. If an article is EPUB ahead of print, will MeSH terms be assigned within 24 hours as well?
That's a fantastic question. No, the citations will not be indexed until they are moved into, we use Medline status internally. So once the article has been published, and then it'll be MeSH indexed.
Great. Thank you, Amanda, and thanks everybody for those excellent questions. Okay, so we've talked about MeSH and entry terms. We've looked at the hierarchical structure of MeSH and talked about automatic explosion. So let's move on to the 4 different types of MeSH terms, and this is number 9 on your handout. So there are 4 types of MeSH terms. The first type of MeSH term is a MeSH heading. MeSH headings represent concepts found in the biomedical literature, and we've looked at eye, fear, and heart attack so far as MeSH headings. And subheadings are used in combination with MeSH headings to focus in on a particular aspect of an article. And that's number 10 on the handout. Subheadings add specificity to a heading, and we're going to do a demo about some subheadings in just a moment. Publication types describe the type of material being indexed, such as a review article or a comment in a journal. And finally, we have something called supplementary concept records, or SCRs. Most supplementary concept records describe chemicals and drugs, which are referred to as substances in PubMed. And I will show you where to find the substance information in a PubMed citation in just a bit. But for now, let's go back to the MeSH database and find an example of each of these types of MeSH terms. So I'm going to pop back over into demo mode and go to the MeSH database. And we'll start with exploring headings. There are about 30,000 MeSH headings. So go ahead if you're following along and enter COVID-19 vaccines into the MeSH database and click search. And this will take us directly into the COVID-19 vaccines record. I'm going to quickly clear my search builder here, which is still holding on. Within the COVID-19 vaccines record, or any record for which subheadings have been applied, you can identify the subheadings towards the top of the record. Subheadings, as I mentioned, are used in combination with a MeSH heading to focus in on a particular subject or aspect of the MeSH heading, and there are over 70 MeSH subheadings. So scanning the list here of subheadings for COVID-19 vaccines, we obviously don't see 7 subheadings here because not all subheadings are applicable. These are the subheadings that are available for use with this term to describe related articles. So if we were interested in finding citations about the adverse effects of COVID-19 vaccines, we could click on the checkbox next to adverse effects and then add that to the search builder. So let's go ahead and do that. I've clicked the subheading adverse effects and I'm adding it to my search builder. So notice we have our MeSH term, COVID-19 vaccines, here in the search builder, followed by a forward slash, which will always indicate that the next term is a subheading. And you can look up the definition of any subheading in MeSH just as we have looked up definitions of MeSH headings. So if you're able, please go to MeSH in a new window and look up the subheading adverse effects. And no worries if you don't want to pull up another screen, you can just follow along here. So we see adverse effects is listed as a subheading. And as I mentioned, subheadings are arranged hierarchically and they explode just like MeSH headings. So I'm not going to show you the hierarchy of subheadings just yet. I have a quick exercise for you. So, question, what other subheadings will be included in this search? If you were to search for COVID-19 vaccines / adverse effects, what other subheadings would be included? Let me know in chat. I see PO and TO. Somebody got to that very quickly, which I assume is abbreviated for poisoning and toxicity. Yep, poisoning and toxicity. Give folks a couple more seconds to explore that on their own. Anybody else come up with poisoning and toxicity? That is the correct answer, and I'm going to pop back into MeSH and show you how we got there. So here I am in the MeSH database. I have searched for the adverse effects subheading, and I'm going to click into that record. So as we've done in other records, I'm just scrolling down a little bit until I can see the hierarchy. And here I see the hierarchy of adverse effects. So if we ran a search with adverse effects attached to COVID-19 vaccines, we would be bringing in citations that have been indexed with adverse effects and these more narrow terms, poisoning and toxicity. So remember that subheadings can also explode, and this is the answer to number 11 on your handout. Do subheadings explode? Yes. And if you wanted to see all of the subheadings and their more narrow terms, you could scroll up in your tree and find the subheadings category and click into that. And much like we did when we were exploring all MeSH categories, the subheadings category will show you all 70 plus terms and the ways that they branch or explode. And as I mentioned, yeah, there are over 70 of these subheadings in MeSH currently. So I'm going to go back to our MeSH record for COVID-19 vaccines. And I'm going to deselect adverse effects for now. I am going to instead click the checkbox next to supply and distribution. So something to be aware of, if you check more than one subheading at a time, they will be combined with or, and your results will include records with any of the selected subheadings. And this is number 12 on your handout. Selecting more than one subheading in the MeSH database record will combine the terms with or, so records with any of these subheadings will be retrieved. So in addition to supply and distribution, I'm going to add the subheading economics to this search. So I've gone ahead and clicked that. And you'll notice below the subheading sections, there's a checkbox that says restrict to MeSH major topic. I'm going to select that as well. During the indexing process, the major point of an article is identified and the major designation is applied to the MeSH heading or to a MeSH heading and subheading combination that represents the major topic. So I want to show you how this populates in our search builder. First, I'm going to clear my former search from our search builder. And now I'm going to add my selections here. So COVID-19 vaccines with the subheadings economics and supply and distribution selected, and the selection to restrict to MeSH major topic. And when I add it to my search builder, that is how it shows up. We see the subheading heading combination with the forward slash, and we see the designation of major. And this is one way to focus a search, which is really great, for those of you who work in academic settings where, a student comes to you and says, I need 3 great articles on a given topic in an hour. This is a great way to bring some further specificity to the search. So I've built this heading, subheading, major topic search, and I'm going to run it in PubMed by clicking Search PubMed. When I do that, I am now in PubMed, and you can see that we get over 350 results. Carol Ann is going to pop a link in chat to the specific citation I'm going to be working in. So thank you, Carol Ann, for putting that PubMed ID in chat. If you would like to put that in your PubMed search box, that'll take you there. Otherwise, the way I am getting to where I'm going is a little bit convoluted. I'm going to sort by best match. I'm going to go to page 4 of my records, and I'm going to scroll to item 33, Bayati et al., inequality in the distribution of COVID-19 vaccine. So I'll give everybody a minute to get into this record with me if you would like. So within this record, I'm going to use my right-hand page navigation to pop down to our MeSH terms. And notice that COVID-19 vaccines supply and distribution appears in this list. We told PubMed that we wanted citations with this heading, subheading combination, and that's what we got. You'll also notice the asterisk next to our MeSH term. This asterisk indicates that the MeSH term COVID-19 vaccines was identified as a major topic of this article. And this is number 13 on your handout. The major points of an article are marked with an asterisk. And I'll note that an article can have more than one major designation applied to it, as this one does. So if we scroll down, we can see that healthcare disparities has an asterisk next to it, which means that healthcare disparities is also marked as a major topic for this record. So we've talked about headings and subheadings. Are there any questions I can answer before we move into discussing publication types and supplementary concept records? Okay, we've had a couple questions come in. Okay, so these are all related to major topics. So Amanda, can you please just talk a little bit more about major topics, if there's a limit to the number of major topics or how something is determined to be a major topic?
That is not actually something that I am an expert in, but let me do some digging and see if I can find some resources to share in the chat.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, the indexing part of the universe is massive. These are great questions, and we'll share resources either towards the end of the session or as part of our follow-up, because it is a really excellent question. Okay, so I'm going to take us into our next type of MeSH term. If I can get back to my slides, one moment, please. Okay, so let's talk about publication types. A publication type can describe the format of a publication being indexed, such as a letter, a case report, an editorial or review article. It can also describe the research study method, like a clinical trial or observational study, and it can describe the source of the funding for research such as NIH or CDC. And this is number 14 on your handout. A publication type can describe the format of publication, the type of research study, or the funding source for the research. So I'm going to hop back into MeSH. And I'm going to type clinical trial into the MeSH search box. And when I do that, I see that my first result is clinical trial with publication types bracketed. And I'm going to pop into the record. And just like MeSH headings and subheadings, publication types are also arranged hierarchically in the MeSH database. So when I scroll down to the MeSH tree in this particular record, I can see both clinical trial and all of the more narrow terms below it. So publication types will also automatically explode. So if you were interested only in phase 3 clinical trials, then that would be the term you should use in your search. You can also, similarly to subheadings and MeSH major categories, you can scroll up in the tree and select the publication type category to see all of the publication types in the MeSH database. And just to note that not all of these terms are available for PubMed searching. Some of these publication types are used elsewhere in the NLM catalog, but not in PubMed. So for example, scrolling down a little bit, bookplate is not a publication type that is cited in PubMed, but it can be found elsewhere in the NLM catalog. So if you were curious about how NLM defines any of these publication types, you can look them up in the MeSH database. And I think it's always kind of fun to just scroll this and remind myself of all the various and interesting formats that we have available to us in the NLM catalog. So I know we're moving around a lot between PubMed and MeSH. I am going to take us to PubMed. I'll do that just from the right-hand side of MeSH here. But that's very not pretty. So I'm just going to go back to an older PubMed record. Carol Ann is going to put another PubMed ID in chat that we will all enter in the PubMed search box to get into a specific citation. So make your way to your PubMed search box however you would like and go ahead and enter the PubMed ID 319-20054. And this is going to take us into a record titled Effect of Bleaching Agents and Toothpaste on the Enamel and In Situ Study. And notice that at the top of the record, there has been a randomized controlled trial label applied. Not all citations will have a publication type label here, but if you were unsure about the publication type, you can find it elsewhere in the citation record, either through scrolling down or again using the page navigation on the right and selecting publication types. And when I do that, I see here that this publication type is a randomized controlled trial. So I'm going to pause really quickly. Have there been any questions that have come in about publication type?
just now we have a question about, is there a benefit to using MeSH publication type over the search result filters? Are they using the same source or field?
I can hop in here on this one. They should perform exactly the same. The search filters on the left-hand sidebar of your search results, publication type specifically, they're using the MeSH vocabulary to filter your results. So whether you type it in yourself with the publication type field tag or use that filter from the sidebar, it should perform the same.
Thank you, Amanda. Great question. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about supplementary concept records, also known as SCRs. And I'll give everybody a caveat that these are quite a bit different than all the other types of MeSH terms that we've looked at. So I am going to hop into MeSH. I'm in a PubMed page, but I'm going to go to the bottom and pop into MeSH. And let's go ahead and type a specific term into the MeSH search. Carol Ann is going to pop this term into chat if you would like to copy and paste. The term is Wolframin protein. So go ahead and search that. And we see our first result is indeed a supplementary concept record. So let's go ahead and go into this record in the MeSH database and just kind of take a look. I'm curious, do folks see any differences or similarities between this and the other type of MeSH records that we've looked at? Please feel free to let me know in chat if you see any differences or similarities. Oh, awesome. There's no tree. Yep, that is a different. We do not see a MeSH hierarchy in this record. Great suggestion, or great call out. Anything else? No subheadings. Absolutely. Yep. Supplementary concept records do not include subheadings like other records do. Yes, we see some very unique entry terms, including human and animal. Yeah, these are all great call outs. So there are differences, there are similarities between supplementary concept records and other MeSH terms. Some of the key differences, as you've observed, is there is no MeSH hierarchy in this record. There are no subheadings indicated in this record. We also don't have a couple of those check boxes that we were playing with. So we don't have the option to apply major topics designations, nor do we have the option to turn off automatic explosion. We do have some similarities, though, with other MeSH records. We do have entry terms listed. Remember, these are kind of like the plain language or synonym terms that might get automatically mapped to a MeSH term. We do see the date that this concept was introduced, and we'll talk a little bit more about dates in a moment. And we do see a definition, which the majority of MeSH terms have as well. But something we see that's a little bit unique is this heading mapped to feature, and I'm going to talk about that momentarily. So a little visual analogy for you here. We can look up supplementary concepts in the MeSH database and use them for searching in PubMed, but supplementary concepts are not part of the MeSH hierarchy. And this is number 15 on your handout. Supplementary concepts are not part of the hierarchy. They reside outside of the tree structure. So if you think of the other types of MeSH terms that we've talked about as being in a tree structure, you might think of supplementary concept records as being like a tire swing attached to a specific branch of the tree. There are about 300,000 supplementary concepts in the MeSH database, and new ones can be added daily, Monday through Thursday, to keep up with changes in the literature. And as a reminder, the other three types of MeSH terms we've talked about, headings, subheadings, and publication types, those are updated annually. So I'm going to go back to MeSH, to our Wolfram protein record. Supplementary concepts are not part of the MeSH tree, but as I said, they are attached or mapped to a specific branch, and that's where this heading mapped to feature becomes very handy. So here we see that Wolfram protein as a supplementary concept has been mapped to membrane proteins. So let's go ahead and see how this shows up in PubMed. I'm going to add Wolfram protein to my search builder, and then I'm going to search PubMed. And here you can see that we have over 370 results. So I'm going to sort this by best match, and I'm going to enter my second record. Please feel free to follow along if you would like. Carol Ann can also put the relevant PubMed ID into chat. But we're going into highly accurate protein structure prediction for the human proteome. So give everybody a minute to pop into that record. So as we've been doing, we can scroll down to a specific section of this record, or we can use our page navigation. I'm going to use page navigation to go down to substances. And here we see the substances section of the PubMed record that allows us to quickly see which chemical and drug terms have been applied to a citation. So here you may often see both MeSH headings and supplementary concepts. And just above this, in the MeSH term section, we see the membrane proteins again, which we know is the heading that Wolfram protein is mapped to. But we don't see Wolfram protein in the MeSH terms because it's not a MeSH heading. It is a supplementary concept record, and so it will only show up in substances. So those are the 4 types of MeSH terms: headings, subheadings, publication types, and supplementary concept records. Do we have any other questions before we kind of dissect a full MeSH record? Oh, there's a great question. Do SCRs ever become headings? Can an SCR ever level up to heading status? Amanda, do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, the answer is yes, and that often happens. And I see that the second question for a simple definition of an SCR is in the chat as well. SCRs tend to be terms that just have not risen to the level of needing a descriptor in the MeSH vocabulary. They don't appear on enough records, or it's not like considered major enough of a topic. But there are times when a term is used. I think a lot of the COVID-19 terms that are in MeSH now started out as SCRs, and then they get promoted to descriptors as they become more widely used. The second case where that happens is that the MeSH vocabulary is updated with descriptors only once a year at the end of the year. And so when we need to respond more quickly and add terms to the vocabulary, an SCR is something that can be added during the course of a year. And then at the end of that year, it might get promoted to an SCR. They aren't always promoted to SCRs, but some are. Or excuse me, promoted to MeSH headings from an SCR.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Those are great
Absolutely.
questions.
I also wanted to just follow up on my earlier answer about using the filter sidebar. I have one caveat to the filters in PubMed. They all use publication types, the exception being the systematic review filter has an additional search strategy attached to it. So I'm going to paste a link in the chat that you can go look at that will tell you the exact search strategy used for any type of filter in PubMed. So if you're curious about that, you can go look there.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Okay. So as we begin to kind of pull this all together, let's go ahead and get into MeSH. And look at all the components of a MeSH record. So I am in the MeSH database and I'm going to search for heart attack. And please feel free to follow along if you would like. So here we are in the MeSH record for heart attack, and we see that my plain language term heart attack mapped to the MeSH term myocardial infarction. The next thing we see is the definition of this term. And I'll note that not all terms have a definition, but where they do, this is where they are located, is right above the term itself. The next component you see in the record is the year introduced. In this case, this concept was introduced in this way in 1979, and this indicates that you'll get citations going back to at least 1979 in PubMed for this concept. And sometimes you will see two dates. So, for example, I'm going to really quickly take us to a different record. I'm going to look for heart assist devices. And when I get into the heart assist devices, I see an example of a MeSH term with two dates, 1986 and 1990. So this means that I could use heart assist devices to retrieve citations indexed as far back as 1986, but the MeSH term for this concept did not become heart assist devices until 1990. Prior to 1990, the concept of heart assist devices was represented by other MeSH terms. Then in 1990, the term heart assist devices was added to the MeSH vocabulary, and at that point, NLM did a find and replace for all citations previously indexed with these other terms and applied heart assist devices to them. So we've included a link on the class handout to a very short video that unpacks this to-date feature a little bit more. It's less than 2 minutes long, so feel free to explore that if you would like. So we know that we can search heart assist devices back through 1986, but what if you wanted to do a historical search for earlier publications? If that were the case, to be as comprehensible as possible in your search, you would want to consider previous indexing terms. And when these are provided in the MeSH record, previous index terms are usually listed below entry terms and before the MeSH tree. So here we see a few different previous indexing terms for this concept that you could also try searching if you were interested in expanding your search. We have a class about about MeSH changes and PubMed searching in our on-demand catalog. And we also have a link on the handout if you were interested in learning more about that. So previous indexing and double dates are unpacked in more detail on your handout. But for now, I'm going to go back to our heart attack record. I could use the back arrow on my browser, or I could go to my recent activity, which is what I'll do, and go back to our heart attack record. So within our heart attack record, we see several allowable subheadings for this term, and the two checkboxes we talked about earlier, restrict to major topic and do not include MeSH terms found below this item in the MeSH hierarchy. The next essential component of a MeSH record that we've covered are these entry terms. Entry terms are the synonyms or variant terms that you can use in MeSH or PubMed to be connected to the preferred MeSH term. And when we scroll past entry terms, we also see in this record a See Also feature. These are terms that you may want to consider exploring as they are related to this concept in an important way. They're different than the previous indexing feature I showed you, but serve a similar purpose in helping you be as comprehensive as possible in your search if you would like to dig a little deeper in this topic. And finally, we see the MeSH hierarchy for this particular term, which lets us know all of the other more narrow terms that will be included in our search. In this case, we see that myocardial infarction shows up in many areas of the MeSH tree and has many more narrow terms that will be associated with it in a search. So I hope that gives you a more comprehensive overview of a MeSH record and how all of these pieces come together. Like any complex interface, this gets more clear every time you use it. So I can encourage you to continue to explore and play around in MeSH and MeSH with PubMed. And I've got a couple exercises, just a couple quick exercises before we wrap up to help us with our exploration. We'll get through those exercises and then we'll do a couple questions. So here's a quick question for all of you. True or false, searching with the subheading therapy will include results indexed with surgery. So if you'd like to find an answer to this, go ahead and go to your MeSH database and search for therapy. And go ahead and put your answer in chat. The question again is true or false. Searching with the subheading therapy will include results indexed with surgery. Yes, and that is true. Great job. The way I imagine all of you got there is checking the subheading record in MeSH by searching it in the MeSH database and then looking to identify any more narrow subheadings. In this case, there are many more narrow designations, including surgery. So great job. Okay, one more exercise. Go ahead and look up hand washing in MeSH. And you'll see that it maps to the MeSH term hand disinfection. How far back can you search with this term? Again, I'll give you some time to find an answer. Go ahead and let me know in chat when you have it. Yes, I am seeing 1982 come through, and that is correct. Great job. So, when we pull up hand disinfection in the MeSH database, we see two dates, 2013 and 1982 in parentheses. The date in the parentheses indicates that the concept of disinfecting hands has been in the MeSH vocabulary since 1982. However, the current MeSH heading that represents this concept was introduced in 2013, but we know that there has been effective find and replace to update the records going as far back as 1982, which means you can search this concept to over 40 years ago. Okay, and those were our two final exercises. Are there any final questions to address before we move on to closing and the class evaluation?
Liz, this is Rebecca.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something, not a question or anything, but you did mention and you pointed to a couple of on-demand classes that are on the handout, the medical subject heading, changes in PubMed searching, and then what's new in MeSH. Those two classes are also taught live, basically at the new year, when MeSH, new MeSH vocabulary is added. And if you're interested in being alerted as to when those classes are offered, I just put in a link. You can sign up for the NNLM weekly new class email. You can subscribe to that. It just goes out once a week with any new classes that we add to our calendar. And those two classes, especially that the PubMed searching one, the MeSH changes in PubMed searching are really beneficial if you do a lot of searching with MeSH. So
That's great. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
I
Okay,
will add, I know we had a few questions about MeSH major topics that we didn't have an answer to. There's actually a separate team outside of PubMed who handles, well, there's a team that handles the development of the vocabulary as well as a team that handles MeSH indexing. And I want to make sure that you all get your answers from the MeSH indexing experts themselves. So my recommendation is that you write to the help desk with your question. When you submit a question through the link that I'm putting in the chat, it gets assigned to that specific team so that a subject matter expert can answer your question for you. So they'll get back to you pretty quickly if you write there. And then those questions are also great for those webinars that Rebecca was just mentioning, that there are indexing staff who attend those, subject matter experts who attend those to answer your MeSH specific questions.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.